Durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial, una generación entera grabó sus experiencias personales para la posteridad. Los camarógrafos de combate se exponían al fuego enemigo a fin de enviar a casa imágenes en película, muchas de ellas a color. Ellos capturaron la historia y al mismo tiempo filmaron a gente común en medio de eventos extraordinarios. Ellos fueron testigos de El color de la guerra. Viaje al infierno, el grupo de bombardeo 351. Era el año 1943. La guerra en Europa estaba alcanzando su punto más alto. Los hombres de estas escenas no son actores. Bajo las órdenes del general Hap Arnold, estas raras secuencias fueron filmadas por los camarógrafos asignados para seguir a los pilotos del grupo de bombardeo 351, filmando desde su vida en el cuartel hasta las peligrosas misiones de bombardeo que llevaban a cabo en medio del territorio alemán. Todo el que volaba con el grupo 351 sabía que tenía una probabilidad de 33% de regresar a salvo de la misión.
Well, it's just scary as you could imagine. And anybody that says they weren't scared just wasn't paying attention.
You could see airplanes spinning out of the air almost anywhere you look. It was either stay with the plane and die now, or bail out and die later.
Durante casi 50 años, la película estuvo guardada en los archivos nacionales en Washington, D.C. Lo que usted está por ver son esas secuencias. Es la verdadera historia de los hombres del Grupo 351 y de los increíbles sacrificios que debieron hacer para sobrevivir durante la guerra. Mayo de 1943. Los pilotos del Grupo de Bombardeo 351 tenían su estación en el campo Geiger, en el estado de Washington. Los casi 7.000 hombres del Grupo 351 conformaban uno de los 48 grupos de bombardeo de la 8ª Fuerza Aérea. Para los hombres que volaron en el Grupo de Bombardeo 351, este era su hogar lejos de casa, una pista de despegue de los aliados cerca de Polbrook, Inglaterra, 112 kilómetros al noroeste de Londres. Algunos estadounidenses que solo habían visto Europa en una pantalla de cine descendieron sobre este tranquilo pueblo inglés de 400 habitantes.
There had been the Pearl Harbor attack, and we were tremendously aware of the situation the country was in, and I wanted to have some part in making things right.
Around 20, everybody thinks they're immortal. It's going to happen to the other person and not to me. So basically that was the attitude, and we were so highly trained that we were chafing at the bit to get into it.
La mayoría de los hombres tenía poco más de 20 años, estaban al comienzo de sus vidas, eran jóvenes, duros y llegaron a Polbrook completamente comprometidos con el esfuerzo de la guerra.
I naturally hated Hitler, and also there was no getting out of it. I mean, I was engaged and very much in love, and the last thing I wanted to do was to leave my fiancée. But this is what was needed. I was a man in a hurry. When I got there, my wife was 3 months pregnant, and I wanted to finish my missions before she had the baby so that she wouldn't have me to worry about.
El coronel Robert Burns era el líder del grupo. En una guerra que devoraba a hombres jóvenes, él era el hombre viejo y solo tenía 27 años.
It's amazing to me now in retrospect how little I fully appreciate what was going on in Europe when we went to Europe.
He had the awesome responsibility of sending these men out on these missions and knowing that some of them weren't coming back. 27 years of age. What an awesome responsibility that was.
So we sailed off to England, fat, dumb, and happy, thinking that, we're a match for anybody. And let me tell you, the awakening was rude.
Born intelligence officer.
Tan pronto como llegaron a Polbrook, recibieron instrucciones de llevar a cabo misiones que los llevarían al corazón del territorio alemán. Desde el principio tuvieron mucho que perder. El 17 de agosto de 1943, la octava Fuerza Aérea hizo despegar 376 B-17 desde varios aeródromos aliados en Inglaterra. Después de cruzar el Canal de la Mancha, comenzaron un largo viaje sobre Europa, de camino a importantes blancos industriales en Alemania. El coronel Burns y los hombres del Grupo 351 recibieron órdenes de bombardear una fábrica en Schweinfurt, Alemania, esa mañana de verano.
Schweinfurt was the home of the ball bearing industry for Germany, and as a strategic target, we were all thinking that if we could just destroy the ball bearing factories, the war would come to a screeching halt.
If you could attack the factories that made them and destroy them, you were going to cause havoc to the German war machine, because ball bearings are used by planes, tanks, trucks, you name it.
Estos bombardeos se llevaban a cabo de día, pero solo en días despejados, de manera que los blancos fueran claramente visibles. Sin embargo, eso significaba que los enormes y pesados B-17 también eran claramente visibles para el enemigo.
The targets were well in Germany, probably some 500 to 600 miles from bases in England, and that meant that for a long period, the bombers were going to be over enemy territory, and that they were going to encounter fierce opposition from the enemy fighters.
Al entrar los bombarderos en Alemania, no había aviones de combate aliados que pudieran protegerlos. Los aviones que escoltaban a los bombarderos sobre el Canal de la Mancha carecían de combustible suficiente para llegar a los blancos y regresar.
In 1943, when the 351st started flying its missions, the only planes available to fly in escort didn't have the range to go all the way into Germany.
En lugar de esto, los B-17 estaban cargados con 9.000 rondas de municiones calibre 50. Podían ser disparados desde diversos portales de armas en cada uno de los aviones. Los líderes militares creían que esto proveía una amplia protección contra los aviones alemanes, pero no era así.
I saw my wingman get just disintegrated right off my right wing. You could see airplanes spinning out of the air almost anywhere you looked all the way in. Our force was attacked by German fighters in mid-channel on the way in, and the running battle went on all the way to Schweinfurt. We did do some damage, but we didn't paralyze the ball bearing industry.
Durante los ataques realizados el 17 de agosto, 60 aviones B-17 cayeron. 600 hombres murieron, desaparecieron o quedaron heridos.
Very, very deadly business. There was probably no more dangerous job in the American Armed Services than being on a bomber crew in the 8th Air Force.
La moral de los soldados y el número de alistamientos decayó poco a poco. El comandante de la octava Fuerza Aérea, el general Hap Arnold, tomó una medida inusual y sumamente dramática a fin de reconstruir su unidad. Mandó hacer una película para impulsar el reclutamiento de aviadores capaces de realizar estos ataques dentro de la Fuerza Aérea. Hizo una jugada brillante al pedir al actor Clark Gable que participara en la filmación.
We're turning a camera on everything and everybody.
I know what General Arnold had in mind in having you make this gunnery picture. Captain Gable, our gunners are already the best in the business. But if they were only 10% better, it'd cost the Germans another 100 fighters a month.
Clark Gable was my mother's heartthrob, and you can understand that an awful lot of English women thought him to be the bee's knees, as we would say. And when the guys in the 351st heard that he was going to descend on them to make a documentary, they were delighted to have such a well-known character with them.
Gable's presence highlighted one of the great things about World War II and the American experience, and this was a war that everybody fought in. You have the president's sons, you have iron workers' sons, you have daughters of the elite going over as Red Cross donut girls. You've got everybody has a role in this, and Gable's participation would also help reinforce that sense that, even Hollywood is here.
Al vivir y volar con el grupo de bombardeo 351, Gable y su equipo documentaron la vida diaria de los hombres y sus misiones. Los camarógrafos tenían acceso a todo, de manera que pudieron montar cámaras en cada ángulo de los aviones, hangares y cuarteles. A pesar de su fama, Gable y sus camarógrafos pronto establecieron lazos de amistad con sus compañeros del Grupo 351.
He was a well-known personage and all that, and sort of aloof, But after he was there for a while, he was out there playing softball on softball teams and all that.
He was very almost shy about venturing into groups of us. Well, some circumstances we were put together. He was as open and as just as normal a human being as you could walk.
Are you ready to go again? Sure. Got to get this thing over. Did you learn
He was the same kind of guy in the movies as you saw on the ground. Just a real nice person. He didn't have to go, and he didn't have to fly 5 missions. So he stuck his neck out, and when he was flying in 43, it was tough, tough, tough.
Al igual que el resto de los hombres del Grupo 351, Gable tenía sus propias razones para unirse a la Fuerza Aérea. Un año antes, su esposa, la actriz Carol Lombard, viajaba por Estados Unidos urgiendo a los ciudadanos para que compraran bonos de la guerra, cuando murió en un accidente de avión. Estas secuencias caseras muestran a Gable y a Lombard un año antes de su muerte.
I just wondered if I had been in his shoes, if I'd have had the courage, integrity, or whatever it was to put it all and risk myself on this enterprise.
Clark Gable había venido a hacer una película, pero no se encontraba en un estudio de Hollywood. Tanto el actor como el resto de los hombres del Grupo 351 fueron colocados directamente en medio del peligro. Las angustiosas experiencias que vivieron se desarrollaron a plena luz delante de las cámaras. Agosto de 1943. Los equipos de camarógrafos estaban muy ocupados capturando imágenes de la lucha que libraba el Grupo de Bombardeo 351. La Fuerza Aérea Aliada estaba centrada en reducir la amenaza aérea de los alemanes en preparación para la invasión del día D. La Real Fuerza Aérea de Gran Bretaña bombardeaba de noche, mientras que la Octava Fuerza Aérea estadounidense bombardeaba de día.
The RAF had turned to night bombing early in the war because of the enemy defenses, but the Americans thought they could succeed where the British had failed, simply because their B-17s and B-24s were much more heavily armed than the RAF bombers.
El B-17 era conocido como la fortaleza voladora debido a su resistencia. El avión que llevaba al Grupo 351 a la batalla estaba tan sólidamente construido que podía soportar daños tremendos.
I've seen pictures of B-17s that were damaged that had an unbelievable amount of battle damage from German fighters and flak, tails almost completely severed, wings with large holes, engines down, large cannon holes in the sides, and a lot of times the plane brought the crews home.
Well, you talk to any crew member of a B-17, and there's not another airplane like it. She's a little slow, but she'll get you there, and she'll take a lot of damage, and she'll bring you back. I've come back quite a few times with 1 or 2 engines missing, but she'll always bring you back.
La fortaleza voladora podía cargar una tripulación de 10 hombres, que consistía en un piloto, copiloto, bombardero, operador de radio, soldados de artillería y un navegante, cuya tarea consistía en guiar al avión hasta su blanco. El navegante Bob Bailey solo se sentía seguro en un avión bombardero.
We had a choice of going in the B-26, they called a Marauder. We called it a flying prostitute because it had no visible means of support. It had very short wings. The second was the B-24, and the third was the B-17. So I decided the B-17 was the best plane to fly in because it had some room for a navigator.
Quizás el B-17 tenía más espacio, pero las tripulaciones de a bordo debían soportar las heladas temperaturas de un avión sin calefacción a grandes alturas. Los hombres dependían de trajes con calefacción eléctrica.
It got really cold, like 40 below up there.
And the coldest that I ever documented, and it's in a little diary I have, was 67 degrees below zero. Below zero, not below freezing.
Lobby doors open.
El B-17 no estaba diseñado para la comodidad, sino para transportar bombas. La carga normal de este helado avión era de 12 bombas de 225 kilogramos que usualmente se dejaban caer a intervalos de 120 metros. A medida que los B-17 se acercaban a su destino, se hacían más vulnerables, pues volaban sin ningún tipo de escolta.
Make a good run now, Steve. I'm on it.
Incluso bajo el ataque de los aviones nazis, los bombarderos no podían hacer maniobras de evasión. Los aviones debían volar en una formación recta y estable si querían dar en los blancos.
As it got over the target, the bombs were released, and that was always good to get rid of those.
Una vez soltadas las bombas, comenzaba el peligroso viaje de regreso a casa. Con frecuencia los B-17 debían esquivar fragmentos metálicos de fuego antiaéreo que disparaban las fuerzas de tierra.
The flak was a terrible thing, but it's just tremendous. You feel like you could get out and walk on it. That's how bad it is.
Pero el B-17 era fuerte y muchas veces marcaba la diferencia entre la vida y la muerte durante estas misiones realizadas a plena luz del día. De regreso en la base, los hombres pintaban nombres e imágenes en las narices de sus aviones, como si crearan talismanes contra los peligros que debían enfrentar.
That was the first pilot's prerogative to actually name an airplane. It gave this inanimate machine something akin to personality, and I guess that it actually made the machine more acceptable to you. It was as if it was an extension of yourself in a way.
Sometimes, you'd have this patriotic piece of nose art with the number of missions marked around the edge with the bombs and the number of German planes shot down. It was really a symbol of pride for the crews that flew in those planes.
My airplane, the Transit Bell, it's a trackless trolley with a very scantily clad, lovely mist sitting on top of it.
Uno de los escuadrones del Grupo 351 llegó a ser conocido como los Chicos Ball. Inspirándose en el nombre de su ex comandante Clint Ball, los hombres se tornaron creativos en el arte de pintar narices.
So all of our planes had the name Ball in it somewhere. We had a Lucille Ball, Loose Ball, Heavy Ball, just right on down the line.
A lot of them named their planes after their wives or their loved ones. They were a sense of home for a lot of them. I was pretty bawdy, some of it.
The female form, I estimate, was on 75% of the aircraft. And when I say the female form, it was usually an undressed female form. The boys, well, boys will be boys.
Los camarógrafos capturaron a los jóvenes persiguiendo a las chicas del lugar.
But the more cultured of the group went into the nearby villages to visit the quaint old cathedrals, churches and shops. Or on days when they were confined near the base, the old cathedrals and shops would come out to see them.
Tal como se ve en las grabaciones, el humor del Grupo 351 de cara a la adversidad se extendía incluso a los dormitorios y al comedor.
We have a fellow that was a tail gunner, and he had been the head chef at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And when Gable got there, he saw the guy, and he got him off the crew, and he became the mess sergeant for the officers' mess in the 351st.
Hello, Captain Gable. What's this? I thought you were a ball tail gunner.
I thought so too, sir, but I've been grounded.
Oh, your pants stuck up on you, huh?
So we did eat pretty good in the officers' mess over there. So he did have that, and basically that might have helped our morale too.
El humor y la buena comida mantenían alta la moral, pero lo que los mantenía activos era la camaradería.
You really have a brotherly feeling toward the people on your crew. You're gonna fly with them, and you're gonna take the same chances that they do, and you're gonna help each other anytime you can.
The crews were very tight. You lived and died literally with these people. And you learned to rely on everyone, and it really helped get everybody through the missions. The sense that you had faith in your crew and everybody was working together and trying to perform the mission, win the war, and also get home alive. And that helped a great deal.
Los hombres del Grupo 351 estaban a punto de averiguar que los lazos que habían formado serían vitales para su supervivencia en los meses que estaban por venir. Septiembre de 1943. A medida que se acercaba el invierno, los hombres que volaban con el grupo de bombardeo 351 debieron enfrentar una tenebrosa realidad. Menos de la mitad de los hombres sobrevivían a sus misiones. Los P-47 acompañaban a los bombarderos durante una parte de su misión. Dado lo limitado de su autonomía, los escoltas tenían que regresar antes de llegar a la parte más vulnerable y difícil de la misión. Después de ese punto, los B-17 no tenían nada que pudiera protegerlos, excepto sus propias armas y sus cerradas filas.
Very complicated choreography to set up these combat formations, but the idea was that you provide massive firepower all around these planes and make it very difficult for German fighters to get through.
Although the formations were formidable and the firepower was massive from a B-17 formation, that didn't stop the German Luftwaffe fighters coming to grips and becoming very successful in downing B-17s.
Los equipos de camarógrafos siguieron filmando cientos de horas de misiones.
Fighters, 3 o'clock low. Watch it. That should be our escort. You're right, sir. 47. Hey, get a load of that slag. Set the door any higher than that. Where do you want to have it? In a bomb bay? Why don't you lean out and smell it? Okay, here they are. 9 o'clock high, enemy fighters. 6 o'clock, level. 2 more, 5. Watch it. You got the colonel's wingman. Smoking on number 4. You got one out of the high squadron. Yep. No chance there.
Pero el actor Clark Gable no quería ser un observador distante, por lo que decidió volar con los bombarderos en varias misiones.
Clark Gable was in the 351st at the early stage. He was there in 1943 at the worst part of the war, when you only had a chance of about 33% of surviving.
La fama de Gable lo convertía en un blanco particularmente interesante para la Luftwaffe y Adolfo Hitler. El Führer ofreció una recompensa a cualquiera que lograra derribar o capturar al actor.
The Germans really wanted to shoot down Clark Gable. That would have been a real coup to the Germans from a propaganda standpoint.
A pesar del riesgo implícito, Gable y su tripulación se unieron al coronel Robert Burns en una misión que debía bombardear un puerto en Nantes, Francia, que el 23 de septiembre de 1943 seguía ocupada por los nazis.
The mission this day was down to Nantes. A German battleship was at anchor there, and that was our target.
Gable grabó sus propias impresiones sobre el bombardeo del puerto en esta misión.
You can't hear what's going on down there, 5 miles below you. But marshalling yards and chemical tanks, ships and warehouses, spare engines and ball bearing factories are disintegrating in molten chaos.
And we squeezed on through the low part, found the target, bombed it, and started back.
Pero los verdaderos problemas de Burns comenzaron después de que soltara finalmente su carga. Pudo ver cómo crecía el peligro mientras giraba en dirección a Inglaterra.
Now I can see that we're down around 8,000 to 10,000 feet. And on the far side of the low point, I can see these German fighters just boiling, taking off, going there. And they're going to be waiting for us on the other side of this cloud mass. Now, merciful God, this is an invitation to a massacre. Out of the mist was the whole German fleet coming out.
They know exactly where you are. They've been watching the stratosphere condense off your wingtips.
I just made a decision right then that I wasn't going to deliberately fly into it. So I flew into the cloud, or toward the cloud mass, as close as I could possibly get, and immediately did a 90-degree turn. We shuffled the deck, and not a shot was fired by them or us. It happened so quick that you barely could notice it happening. So that was our encounter with the German Air Force.
En cuestión de segundos, las nubes dejaron ciegos tanto a los aviones aliados como a los de la Luftwaffe, así que no pudo haber combate. Fue un momento de suerte. En unas secuencias grabadas ese día, vemos a Clark Gable y a Robert Burns cansados pero agradecidos de haber podido regresar con vida después de la misión sobre Nantes.
It had a happy ending in that we all got back to England.
You're just glad to be back on the ground, and thank your lucky stars that you were able to make it, because it was so close.
I would ask myself what it was that got me through. Was it good training? Was it good technology that plane, good maintenance? Was it God? Or was it luck? I kind of prefer luck, but I haven't really made up my mind, and I don't think I have to.
Pero el alivio no era absoluto, pues los hombres se daban cuenta de que algunos de su escuadrón no habían corrido con la misma suerte.
It was really a bad feeling to walk in your hut and see 4 or 5 empty bunks, and the summary court officer would come around to gather their personal effects and everything, and it was a sad situation. I mean, it had to affect you one way or another. You hated to lose friends, and you did have friends.
Pero había poco tiempo para lamentarse. En cuestión de semanas, los hombres del grupo de bombardeo 351 enfrentarían más peligros en su siguiente misión, la marcha hacia el día D. Noviembre de 1943. 9 meses antes, los camarógrafos habían comenzado a filmar la vida diaria del grupo de bombardeo 351 mientras luchaban contra el enemigo en los cielos de Europa. Las misiones de Clark Gable se convirtieron en leyenda entre los hombres del grupo 351.
He wore cowboy boots, which wasn't a regulation, but he got by with it. He had the heel of his cowboy boot blown off by a piece of shrapnel. That's how close it was.
There may have been a bit of Hollywood hyperbole here. It was said on one occasion a cannon shell passed within 6 inches of his head.
Después de 9 meses de combate y luego de haber rodado 15.000 metros de película, Gable y sus camarógrafos regresaron a Estados Unidos. Su misión había sido subir la moral a los hombres del grupo 351, así como alentar a sus compañeros de aviación. La misión estaba cumplida.
Enemy of America, look at these men. They're not gonna lose, brother.
El actor y sus camarógrafos se habían marchado, pero el fin de la guerra aún estaba lejos. Se estaba planificando un ataque mayor que debía cambiar el curso de la Segunda Guerra Mundial.
Remember your route in to this DR point, where you go northeast to avoid this black area. T-47.
En febrero de 1944, el grupo 351 se preparó para una serie de ataques que se prolongarían durante una semana. La llamaban la Gran Semana. En ese entonces era un plan estrictamente confidencial llamado Operación Argumento. Más de 1000 bombarderos, escoltados por casi 900 aviones de guerra anglo-estadounidenses, atacarían un grupo de fábricas de aviones alemanas. Las fuerzas aliadas estaban decididas a detener la fabricación de aviones de guerra alemanes.
Now this was preceding the June 6, 1944 invasion of the continent. So therefore, in order to help prepare for the invasion in June on the French coast, we knew that you had to knock out the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force.
All the groups in the 8th Air Force were put on what was known as a maximum effort, i.e. every airplane that could be flown in combat and every combat crew to man them would be utilized. And this was the all-out attempt to try to destroy German aircraft production.
En la noche del 19 de febrero de 1944, los comandantes de grupo recibieron ciertas órdenes. La Gran Semana comenzaba al día siguiente. Había mucha ansiedad la noche anterior a la misión.
You really never got a real deep sleep the night before you were going to have to fly on a bombing mission. And when the guy put the flashlight in your face and woke you up, I mean, you were it.
And about 2 or 3 in the morning, you'd hear a knocking on the door, and some fellow in a loud voice with a flashlight would come barging into the room, shine the flashlight in your eyes, and get up. Time for briefing. Mission day.
Breakfast at 3, briefing at 4.
El 20 de febrero, David Mathis se encontraba en una base aérea cercana cuando supo que su hermano Archie despegaría desde Polbrook.
I was talking with a friend of mine, and he says to me, I understand you have a brother over here that's a gunner in a B-17 outfit. And I said, yes, I do. And I don't mind telling you I'm very apprehensive about the whole thing, and I'm worried. You can tell from the activity going around the base right now that there's something big coming up, and I'm worried about Archie.
Ese día antes del amanecer, Archie Mathis y los 9 miembros de su tripulación esperaban nerviosamente dentro del avión conocido como 10 caballos de fuerza. Era apenas su segunda misión como equipo. 10 caballos de fuerza con 5 misiones registradas. Ya había presenciado más batallas que los hombres a quienes llevaría a pelear. La edad promedio de los hombres de este equipo era de 23 años. El piloto Dick Nelson Jr. y el copiloto Ronald Bartry volarían el avión. Walter Trumper sería el navegante. Carl Moore era el artillero de techo. El operador de radio Joe Rex era el más joven de la tripulación. El artillero Archie Mathis estaba en una esfera plástica ubicada en la parte inferior del avión, que giraba en todas las direcciones para disparar a los aviones enemigos, sin importar dónde estuvieran.
Archie was the smallest in the crew, so he volunteered to be a ball turret gunner.
Wouldn't want to be a ball turret gunner. You'd either be claustrophobic, it's a very dangerous place to be. But I think you have to emphasize the fact that everybody shared the danger on these flights.
Tom Sowell y Russell Robinson estaban listos para disparar las armas ubicadas justo detrás de la mencionada esfera. En la parte trasera del avión, Mac Harbaugh era el artillero de cola. El 10 caballos de fuerza era solo uno de los aviones del grupo 351 que volarían ese día. 20 aviones se formarían para dirigirse a las fábricas de aviones de Leipzig, ubicada a unos 128 kilómetros al sur de Berlín. A las 8:45 de la mañana, una bengala verde señaló a los aviones que era el momento de encender sus motores. 10 caballos de fuerza debía ser el 15º avión en despegar. Pero cuando el teniente Nelson dio la señal de todo listo al personal de tierra, un jeep se atravesó delante del avión y Nelson se vio forzado a virar. 10 caballos de fuerza quedó atrapado en el lodo. Fue el último avión en despegar y dada su condición de rezagado, era blanco fácil para el enemigo.
And most of the American airmen knew that if they were a straggler, if their aircraft had lost contact with the major group, they were dead meat.
A las 9:40 de la mañana, 10 caballos de fuerza finalmente despegó. Mientras trataban de alcanzar al resto de los aviones del grupo 351, el riesgo se hacía cada vez mayor.
To hold formation, you had to be extremely careful that you didn't collide with another aircraft, and you often encountered prop wash from aircraft ahead, which could throw you out of formation if you weren't careful.
La Luftwaffe no tardó demasiado en encontrar al grupo. Para el mediodía, mientras los aviones sobrevolaban Alemania, encontraron una fuerte resistencia. A pesar de la intensidad de los ataques, los artilleros del grupo 351 derribaron a 3 Messerschmitt alemanes, dañaron a un cuarto y soltaron bombas sobre sus flancos. Pero esto no detuvo a la Luftwaffe, que comenzó a rodear a 10 caballos de fuerza. 2 Messerschmitt 109 atacaron de pronto al bombardero. Varios proyectiles de 20 milímetros quebraron la ventana superior del copiloto e hicieron explotar la cabina de mando.
I remember the pilot calling to say we're climbing out on 23-5 and all is clear, and I hear that there's fighters in the area, so watch out. So the first plane come from in 1 o'clock high, and it decapitated co-pilot. And knocked the pilot's right side of the face off, and he was unconscious.
El avión sin piloto siguió cayendo mientras los ataques de la Luftwaffe no paraban. Ahora miembros de la tripulación que nunca habían piloteado un avión tenían que aprender rápidamente o morirían.
So Carl Moore was flying top turret. He got a hold of the control and pushed the co-pilot and the pilot back in their seat and pulled it out. He didn't do a professional job because he wasn't a professional. I remember then that the navigator said, Carl, take a heading of 360, that was due north toward England, and stay in the cloud. Mount your gun because we may have fighters coming in through the cloud.
10 caballos de fuerza estaba gravemente dañado. Su cabina de mando estaba destrozada, su radio inoperante y su fuselaje lleno de agujeros. ¿Lograría el bombardero regresar a Paul Brook?
Lieutenant Trumper was the only officer left on board, and they decided to fly back to England. Walter gave everybody the opportunity, do you want to bail out now or stay on the aircraft as long as you can? Everybody said, let's stay with it as long as we can.
Los vidrios de las ventanas estaban quebrados. La temperatura dentro del avión era de 45 grados centígrados bajo cero.
Their hands were just blistered, their face was just so cold they couldn't feel anything. As they're getting closer to getting out of enemy territory, they decide to move Lieutenant Nelson. And all along they thought Lieutenant Nelson was also dead. And it's when they went to move him that they realized that he was still alive.
El piloto de 10 caballos de fuerza estaba sangrando y había perdido el conocimiento. Se les estaba acabando el combustible. Archie, Walter y Joe se turnaron para volar el avión tratando de llegar a casa a pesar de las terribles condiciones. Al ver una línea costera delante de sí, rogaron porque fuera a Inglaterra. 20 de febrero de 1944. Una llamada de emergencia entró a la torre de control de la base aérea de Polbrook. 10 caballos de fuerza estaba gravemente averiado. Nadie a bordo sabía si lograrían llegar con vida.
I was in the control tower when that airplane came back over England, and we got the word that the pilot was dead, the co-pilot was unconscious but still living, and the navigator and maybe the crew chief had flown the airplane and they had found Polbrook.
10 caballos de fuerza recibió permiso inmediato para aterrizar. El artillero Archie Mathis, convertido en piloto, manejaba los controles de vuelo, mientras que el teniente Trumper le daba instrucciones de aterrizaje desde la torre de Polbrook. Pero Archie no estaba seguro de poder aterrizar el B-17.
So both the group commander and I then went to 2 different airplanes. Each of us flying an airplane to try to let them fly on us and we'd get them to the ground. They couldn't stay, they didn't know enough about handling the airplane to even stay in the air with us. And as a matter of fact, it was a threat then to everybody to try to do more with them.
Se ordenó a los artilleros que se lanzaran desde el avión en paracaídas uno por uno.
Russell Robinson, the other waist gunner, and Rick, we broke our legs when we bailed out 3 out of 5. Because then Carl and back bailed out, no problem.
Archie Mathis, Walter Trumper y Nelson, el piloto inconsciente, eran los únicos que quedaban a bordo del avión.
The group commander and I pled with them to bail out of the airplane.
Walter Trumper radioed over to him and said, no, we refuse to leave our pilot, Lieutenant Nelson, in this aircraft, and we would like to try to land again.
So they sought some empty, open field to try to put it on the ground, and I guess unbeknownst to them, the ground sloped up into a little ridge, and they did get it to the ground, but when it hit this ridge, it just nosed and tumbled and totally exploded.
Instantly, Archie Mathis was killed, and Walter Trumper were both killed instantly in the crash. Their pilot, Lieutenant Nelson, was actually survived the impact of the crash. The base doctor said if they would have been able to land the airplane, he would have survived the wounds that he had received over Leipzig, and he was just unconscious in the aircraft the whole time.
La historia de 10 caballos de fuerza se convirtió en titular de noticias y sus tripulantes en héroes instantáneos. Sin embargo, para algunos la noticia causó un gran impacto. David Mathis supo la noticia por medio de un diario local.
That night of the 21st, I happened to pick up a paper on the chair right next to me. And there was a picture of Archie on the very front page and a picture of Max Hagbo parachuting down over the base. And I thought, oh my God, Archie is dead.
Mientras los sobrevivientes del bombardero se recuperaban del accidente, se premió tanto a los vivos como a los muertos por su coraje. Tom Sowell, Russell Robinson y Joe Rex recibieron cada uno un corazón púrpura. Rex también ganó la estrella de plata. Carl Moore recibió la Cruz de Servicio Distinguido por haber ayudado a pilotear el avión. Nelson, Barkley, Trumper y Mathis recibieron un corazón púrpura como homenaje póstumo. Archie Mathis y Walter Trumper, quienes perdieron sus vidas tratando de rescatar a su piloto, recibieron una medalla de honor, la distinción más elevada de la milicia.
It was only apropos that he would win that medal because you go back to the scriptures. John 15, chapter 13 verse, which states, "Greater love has no man than this, that you give up your life for friends." which he did.
Gracias a sus sacrificios, los tripulantes del bombardero 10 caballos de fuerza se convirtieron en la tripulación más condecorada de la 8ª Fuerza Aérea. Su misión final ayudó al grupo de bombarderos 351 a reducir la amenaza que representaba la Fuerza Aérea Alemana antes del día D.
There is no doubt that the devastation caused, the destruction to factories, the destruction to the railroad system, communication system, above all, the oil plants, was really decisive in bringing about victory.
Pero el éxito del Grupo 351 tuvo un costo elevado. Durante el curso de la guerra se perdieron más de 175 aviones con sus tripulantes. Muchos más resultaron heridos o fueron capturados.
It's just a sign of what these people were willing to go through to accomplish the mission. And they were an essential element of the team that won World War II.
Uno por uno, a medida que los hombres del Grupo 351 completaban al menos 25 misiones, eran enviados a casa. Al llegar a Estados Unidos, su visión del mundo se había transformado.
When we actually got to New York, we sailed very slowly past the Statue of Liberty. On my 22nd birthday. Boy, what a birthday present.
The homecoming was a little bittersweet because, you know, we'd done a lot of destruction in Europe. People should never lose sight of the fact that these young men who gave their lives or fought so gallantly did it for a good cause. The Nazi tyranny was the biggest tyranny of the 20th century, and these young men overcame that tyranny.
I wouldn't take anything, hardly, for the experience and the adventure and the pride and the accomplishment and, of course, getting back. But I wouldn't give you a nickel to do it again.
Once you came through alive, it was something you could look back on and be proud of, that you were a part of that period of history. I was proud of the fact that I was in the 351st.
Hoy existen diversos monumentos en memoria al grupo de bombarderos 351 que celebran su contribución a la victoria de los aliados. En Fallbrook, Inglaterra, el cuartel y el comedor ya no existen, pero el espíritu del grupo 351 sigue vivo.
Were there ghosts? I don't believe in ghosts, but there was something there, some sort of aura about the place, as if all the action that had gone on there, all the sacrifice, all the noise, all the laughter, had somehow had an effect on that little piece of England. And I think it's still there.
Pero quizás el recuerdo más grande sean las cientos de horas que se grabaron del Grupo 351. Concebido como un experimento, ahora permanece como el recuento más vívido de los hombres del Grupo 351 y de sus misiones.
You know, the story of combat is as old as mortal men. When the times and the tasks demonstrate themselves so that there's no question with what has to be done, people will rise to the occasion.